Hello, my name's Gavin and this is Genre Books, and although I don't own a cowboy hat, I will be taking part in this year's June on the Range. I did take part in last year's June on the Range as well, but only as a reader, and now I've got to come up with a list. And although I do not like the term pile of possibilities, I'm finding that since making these videos, calling something a TBR is just a tad overconfident. Let's get some of the other June commitments out of the way first. I will be finishing The Pillow Book by Zane. I will be continuing to read every Lawrence Vanderpost book I have, with The Heart of the Hunter. And it's also the beginning of the summer of sports, and I will be reading a pulp magazine, Super Sports Volume 6, Number 1. I will be reading The Natural by Bernard Malamud. I will also be reading Frank Merriwell's Diamond Foes by Bert L. Standish. And to give that sports western crossover, I'll also be reading The Shortstop by Zane Grey. So now we're in Zane Grey territory, let's stick with the westerns. I will be reading a western pulp during the month, and that will be Exciting Western Volume 16, Issue Number 1. And to get the pulp stories and the short stories out of the way first, during the month I will be dipping into and hopefully completing the best western stories, 22 different stories by Max Brand, Zane Grey, Bret Hart, O. Henry, Jack London, Jack Schaefer, amongst others. Now these are the best because it says so, but I'll be putting that to the test. I will also be reading a book that I got for my birthday, which was the Pulp Western Anthology Volume 1. For a little colour, context and insight, I will be reading The Western Pulp Hero by Nick Carr, a book from, I'm going to say 1989, not far off. An investigation into the psyche of an American legend. This book has a certain rough and ready feel and a photocopied vibe with the illustrations inside, but it has what looks to be a fairly comprehensive history of Western pulps, and also looks at some of the writers and some of the artists of the magazines as well. So pulps aside, the requirements for June on the Range are minimal. Read a Louis L'Amour, read a Zane Grey. Last year I read the first 3 books in Louis L'Amour's Sackett series. I'm conscious that I have a much more varied list this year, so I will not be able to read another 3, but the one I've got is, for a Louis L'Amour book, I think probably fairly chunky, and that is Jubal Sackett. I don't think I'll be able to pass off reading The Shortstop as my Zane Grey Western, so I will be reading From Gutenberg, Riders of the Purple Sage, and in physical format its sequel, The Rainbow Trail. I also want to take a peek into the origins of what we come to understand as the classic Western story, and I will be doing that by reading a couple of dime novels. Haven't quite decided which ones yet, but I'm thinking The Steam Man of the Prairies might be fun, or Seth Jones. I am also hoping to read Emma Ghent Curtis's The Administratrix, which I think is the first novel to talk about cowboys. I can't find this on Gutenberg, I can't find this in anything other than a print-on-demand hardback, but I will track a copy down. A book which is easier to find and one which is a more popular option to crown as the first Western is The Virginian by Owen Wister, and that is available in public domain, so I'll be reading that. Sticking with public domain, Roger's Cheap Old Book Club this month is also June on the Range adjacent, and that is Zorro by Johnston McCulley. But from there on in, it's all physical copies. Clarence E Mulford, a Hopalong Cassidy novel. Hopalong Cassidy Takes Cards. I've not read any Clarence E Mulford before. I do see these wonderful Hodder and Stoughton Yellow Jacket books around at book fairs, and I'd like to know if it's worth obtaining more of these. Another author who often turns up on the shelves of the Western section of second-hand bookshops, if you're ever lucky enough to have a second-hand bookshop that has a section for Westerns, is J.T. Edson. This is one of 2 J.T. Edson books I've got, and I don't want to buy any more until I've read one to see whether I like it or not. This is The Hard Riders. It looks like it's part of a series. I'm hoping I do not have to have read a number of previous volumes for this to make any sense. The next one is an old Corgi paperback, 2 shillings and 6pence, and this is War Bonnet by Clay Fisher. Question: what was a man to do, fight or run for cover? The answer depended on who the man was. Jesse Callahan. Now he wasn't about to do no running. The next book is The Trumpets of Company K by William Chamberlain, which looks to be about a group of cavalrymen. This next book is an author I've never heard of and a publisher I've never heard of. This is Eagle on His Wrist by Homer Hatton from Sharon Publications. The fanatics on the border were burning, pillaging and murdering when Cantrell arrived on the scene. Cantrell had just been cashiered out of the Union Army, and the troubles of the Southerners were none of his business. But there was Lizetta, willful, beautiful and in danger. For this woman's love, Cantrell took command and wrote bloody history along the Kansas-Missouri line. Now, whether Eagle on His Wrist is more action or romance, I don't know. I've got a feeling I know where the next couple fall, however. Jubalcade, number 6, The Burning Man. This is going to be the second book I've read in June where the main character's name is Jubal. That must be beating my previous record by 2. The tagline on this is simply The Deadly Doctor versus the Ku Klux Klan. So, KKK members being shot, I'm all for it. From Sphere Books, Lee Layton's Big Ugly. From the dust of an old diary comes this story of a big man, big as life and bigger than death. Bill Shell, his wife Betty, his brother Ben, Al Corley and the handful of people he led from Nebraska to Colorado, that small heroic group of which Big Bill Shell was about to become so crucial a part, loving, fighting, working, going about the business of living, because Big Ugly was there to see to it that they did not die. This last book, if I end up having time for it, I don't think it's strictly a Western, but if this bleeds over from June on the Range into Rocket Summer, I think it's a good book to straddle both. This is Six Gun Planet by John Jakes, a science fiction satire on the Old West that separates the men from the myths. Pacifist Zach Randolph got immediately to the point. Buster, maybe you've heard that Buffalo Young is in town. Dr. Buster Levinson nodded. Yes, my boy, I have seen him, Buffalo Young, From all that I have heard in my journeyings, the genuine article. Atrocious grammar, moustaches to hear, plus those pearl-handled beauties he carries, and those hovering black harpies of the pit, those 3 easy riders who follow him everywhere to scrape up his victims. I also understand he's called you out. It is a story of how off-worlder Zach Randolph is forced into a showdown with the legendary gunslinger Buffalo Young. It is guaranteed to provoke every sci-fi reader one way or another. It's meaningful, relevant, and funny. Big boasts. Let's see. I'll be honest, that really is a pile of possibilities rather than a hard TBR. I'm going to be pushed to try and get all of those read during June. Hopalong Cassidy may have to hop along a little bit further. The trumpets of Company K may be silenced for a few months yet. And I may just have to stick to 2 Zane Grey books instead of the 3 planned. However, considering 2 years ago my experience of westerns was 24 films and a visit to the National Cowboy Museum and their amazing barbed wire collection, I'm disproportionately excited for some of the books in this pile for June, as well as those books from the ether which will make their way onto Kindle and tablet. There are a few more days left in May to try to squeeze in a little more horror, but after that I will be saddling up and getting ready. Thanks for your time.